his first position was here with us at Trinity Church in Columbus as a curate. And from here, he left to become a rector of a church in Martinsville, Virginia, which I'm sure he'd probably mention something about it. And he's quite a character if you haven't met him. Remember it too. Welcome, Father.
Guys, my heart is pounding. I have to preach every Sunday now. I don't have a little curate to boss around. And then, so normally I don't get nervous before I speak anymore. And if I give a bad sermon, I just give a bad sermon. It's fine. And then so that anxiety's kind of gone from seeing all of these faces that I've known from what feels like a lifetime ago and also just yesterday. My heart is pounding through my chest. And then so I just, we're going to get into the doom and gloom of Lent in just a little bit, but I wanted to share with you, this has nothing to do with my presentation, just a couple of holy spaces that I remember from Columbus. And then I couldn't find any pictures from these, but they are ingrained in my mind. So when we got Vanilla Bean, many of you remember that, and just what a joyful thing that was. All of a sudden, all of my hobbies that were not dog-friendly went by the wayside, and I just constantly looked for things I could do with my dog. And so when the water in the river is low, and you go up by Synovus, you can go over the fence and then down to that little lazy river section. And then there's a rock at the very top that you can jump off of. And then when I jump off of there, Bean comes running after me and jumps right in. She does like this little pounce thing. And we would just spend hours and hours and hours in that space, exploring around. And it was one of those things where I could just feel completely at peace and whole. It was one of my safe places. And another holy place that really sticks out to me is the chapel here at Trinity. That is where I celebrated my first Eucharist. It's where I learned to fall in love with Rite One, and somehow I've become a Rite One Episcopalian. I love it so much. And there's just something about that space. It's so I moved around a lot when I was a kid, and then the only feeling I can equate it to is I've only been back to the town that my childhood was in once, and it was 2 years ago. And then driving up and down those streets I used to explore on my bicycle, it filled me with this heartfelt feeling that is really indescribable. And then that's what I felt yesterday when I was back in that chapel celebrating God's grace with you. And Martinsville has been incredible for my wife and I. Leandra she's never lived in a small town before. She thought Columbus was a small town. And Martinsville is tiny. It's teeny tiny. And then it's been through a lot of hard times. My sermon yesterday was about how experiencing this great community here at Trinity and in Greater Columbus, it gave me a message of hope to give a place like Martinsville. Martinsville, all of the jobs just evaporated and all of that. And then yesterday I felt like a relatively negative picture of Martinsville, but it's still a wonderful place to be. So I just want to share a couple of sacred spaces with you and kind of some snapshots of what my life is like now. So that is Peanut. And so we got Peanut from Paws the day before we moved to Martinsville. And we broke our lease agreement for just one night. And we had 2 dogs in our apartment, which is against the rules. And she came up with us. And she's a big part of my life and the life of the church as well in the community. She was terribly abused, probably by children. She has scars all around her neck. And she's terrified of children. And she won't chase after him and bite him, but if a little kid comes, he gets in her business, she'll get really scared and snap. And so we have to be very careful where to take her, but when she's around old people, she's in her element. And so when I go to nursing homes, and Peanut and I do our regular rounds, And I'll be talking with the nurse, and then I'll hear an old person in their room go, "Oh, look at that dog," and then I'll just snap my fingers, and Peanut will go in there without me and go up to them and lean against them and just wag her tail. And it is just, I call her my associate for pastoral care. She's great. So that's Peanut, and she comes in the office with me all the time. And then, the Smith River, which goes through Martinsville, is not nearly as cool as the Chattahoochee here, but it is a river and is actually great for trout fishing, and I'm not much of a fisherman, so that doesn't appeal to me. So we got paddle boards, and then so we take the dogs out on the river all the time on the paddle boards. And one of the things that has organically developed within Christ Episcopal Church is we go on the river a lot on little informal trips. And so that is Alice Lowry, who is a new member of the church, and we floated 9 miles down the river. And then she insisted on being on her paddle boards, and her sister was on my wife's paddle board, and it was a lot of fun. And then one time, a senior in our church decided to do a charity dodgeball event. And so we decided to make a team. And then I thought it was going to be 4 or 5 people. It was very informal. There was no intentionality involved with this. And we found a drawer with a whole bunch of moth-eaten shirts that said Christ Episcopal Church softball team. And then it was from the 90s. And then they looked terrible. And so we got a Sharpie and crossed off soft and wrote Dodge. And then and then it almost became a joke. And then we had just incredible participation in dodgeball. And so we ended up buying a whole bunch of dodgeballs. We found a gym we can use for free. And so we have essentially pick up dodgeball games through the church. And it's actually been great evangelism. At least 3 of the people there started attending church because they were invited to dodgeball. Sometimes if you invite people to church, and I think this is usually not the case, but usually the person asking feels weird about it. But you can say, "Come play dodgeball," and it feels like neutral space, and people like to be asked. And we forget that sometimes, and dodgeball makes it easier. And another thing we did is, so there's the Dick and Willy Trail, which is a rails to trails thing. So they paved over an old road bed. And then so once again, I like finding hobbies that my dogs can participate in. So I decided to get a pair of rollerblades and just see if the dogs would pull me, and they do. And we'll go for miles and miles and miles, and then rollerblading on the Dick and Willy. And then they must have some sled dog in them from a long time ago, because they know exactly what to do. And I have not fallen yet. All right, so were just a few of the snapshots of some sacred moments in my life right now. And then it's been such a great move for me and my family. The church is doing surprisingly well, and I should have included some pictures of our campus. We own 3 buildings that are over 100 years old or close to it, and all of them are falling apart. And there's a lot of deferred maintenance as far as physical plant, and a lot of deferred maintenance as far as ministry goes. We still have a model set up that worked decades ago, but does not work for us anymore. And so, and then we've just been kind of trucking along, taking it one step at a time. And then it's an incredibly motivated church. They told me that they were a stagnant parish before I got there. I just breathed new life into them. And my memory of showing up there was having no idea what I was supposed to do. I've never been my own boss before. I felt paralyzed by indecision. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible. And they were like, oh, you're such a great leader and all this stuff. I was a cheerleader. I wasn't the quarterback. I wasn't. They just needed someone to tell them how great they were, and then just all of this incredible leadership boiled up from the congregation, and then all of a sudden we're starting new ministries. People were going out and telling people how wonderful their church is. And it was an incredible transformation to see, and it makes me very thankful that there's so many people that take their ministry seriously. And then... So moving on to what I actually planned on talking about. Just a second. So I've got an interesting relationship with Lent. And one of the first times I really felt like I did Lent well is my best friend in high school was a very devout Muslim. And I did Ramadan with him one time. And then he was very strict. Like no water, no nothing during the day. And once the sun goes down, you go to mosque and break fast. And it wasn't about self-improvement. It wasn't like, oh, food's bad for you or water's bad for you. It was about a sacrifice. It was about disrupting the regularity of your life. It was about giving up control and turning it over to God. And when we look at the tradition that we've inherited in Lent, that is what our spiritual ancestors did. It was a whole season of fasting. It wasn't a season of self-improvement. It wasn't about giving up sin. It was about sacrifice. And so every Lent, I kind of struggle with what to do. And so like many Episcopalians, I've given up alcohol a number of times for Lent. I think I even have a slide. So that's my favorite brand of vodka, Tito's. And another thing, I should really go through my slides before I keep on talking. So we see a lot of wilderness imagery in Scripture. And then so this imagery, we draw on that during Lent. And then so in the wilderness, this is a picture from my last trek on the Appalachian Trail. And then that's at McAfee's Knob, which is actually relatively close to Martinsville where I live now. It's the most photographed section of the Appalachian Trail. And in this last trip, we saw a lot of really interesting things, and we were also in the middle of a drought. And so there were some days where we would actually go 8 or 9 miles without being able to refill our water. And in 100-degree heat, when you're trekking with a 40-pound pack up and down mountains, that's a problem. And you know what it feels like to be vulnerable. To not have cell phone reception and think like, okay, I'm experiencing early signs of dehydration. I'm an EMT, I know this. So I could be in serious trouble. You feel vulnerable. And then when the ancient Jews left Egypt, the wilderness was both the mechanism of their salvation. That's how they left oppression and slavery. And it was also where they lamented God for making them leave the comfort of their oppression. They had their flesh pots. They were safe, they were comfortable, and they were slaves in Egypt. And then the wilderness was their salvation, but it also disrupted their lives. And so my experience with my friend Ibrahim in high school, and when I read Scripture, I see echoes of that experience there. And so when I go into Lent, I try to think of what to do. And then there's some things, self-improvement's not inherently bad. I'm just not sure if that's what Lent's about. So back to Tito's. You can give up Tito's for all of the right or all of the wrong reasons during the season of Lent. Are you an alcoholic that gives up alcohol during Lent to show that you don't have control and that you depend on God? Or are you doing it to prove to yourself that you are in control? You know what? I can give up alcohol during Lent, and I am in control of this habit that could be disastrous. One brings you closer to God. One gives you the illusion that you are in control. And so we can do the same thing, and it can be counterproductive, or it can nurture our relationship with God. And another thing, this is a picture and a title from The Onion, and it's sarcastic. I think it's also quite relevant in our day and age. It says, 6-day visit to rural African village completely transforms girl's Facebook page. Do we do charity for our own benefit, to transform our Facebook page, to make us feel better about all of the ills in the world? Or do we do it because we love our neighbor? And then one of the things that is kind of trending right now in the season of Lent is you try to do some sort of concrete good with your Lenten discipline, which is good. It's good to give to charity. It's good to give to responsible charities like Heifer International or Episcopal Relief and Development. But are you giving up your mocha latte in the morning and putting that money in a jar to send it to help orphans on the other side of the world to make yourself feel better? Or are you doing it to actually have a difference in the world? And I think that these two examples and many others are a symptom, is an example of how we've turned Lent into a mechanism of maintaining our own control rather than to give up control, to let it go. There should be Frozen right behind me, right? To let it go, to let go of that control, to lift up your soul to God, to let God lead you and guide you and transform you, to be like you are in the wilderness, where you completely depend upon God for everything. You may mourn all of the comfort and all of the security that you have found when you were a slave, but God wants you to be free, and it's not always easy. And so the example, and then I'm going to tell you the story of like what I'm doing for Lent. And then I want to preface it with, I'm pretty sure next year I'm going to be convinced that this approach is all wrong. This is just where I am now. So something happened on November 16th. And then so to tell you a little bit about myself, so we're going to introduce the characters. I have a really bad temper. And I don't necessarily see it as a fault. When I get angry, I get articulate. When I get angry, I am able to do things that my desire to maintain the status quo would normally not let me do. My dad also has this characteristic. And then so one of many examples of how this manifests in positive ways is we were actually here right outside of 11th and Bay. My dad was visiting us right before we moved, and then we witnessed domestic violence right on the sidewalk. And this man was getting violent with this woman, and my dad, it was like a switch flipped, and I jumped over, and then she was asking for someone to just get her out of there, and then I got in his face, and I bowed up to him. I didn't touch him, and I grabbed her hand, and I was walking her across the street, and I was blocking traffic, and he followed us, and he called her things that you should never call a young woman who's crying. And so I turned around, and I don't know what I said to him, but it was extremely profane, and it scared him. And he turned around and he threatened to kill my dad, because my dad was helping. And then 2 Army Rangers jumped over the fence, and he was detained and arrested. He was high on cocaine, and he had a gun in his car. And then I drove her home, and anger's not a bad thing. And I think that part of me, that's an example of how it can manifest in a positive way. And the same token, I think this temper can also lead to sin, can lead to bad things. All right, so let's enter in the other characters. And I am not going to include pictures because it actually ties in with my Lenten resolution. I'm not going to show you these people, and I urge you to not Google them or YouTube them because they're evil and they feed off that attention. So they are the Robertsons, and then they are the sole pastors and the only members of the Church of Christ on Starling Avenue in Martinsville, Virginia. And they broke off of the Church of Christ in Collinsville, Virginia, and started their own church. Then they became convinced that they are the only true Christian church, that every other church is guilty of the sin of denominationalism. And then they are a very attractive family. They're handsome. The sons are a little bit younger than I am, mid-20s, and then the father is probably early 50s. And then they're extremely charismatic. And then they know how to talk to the poor and kind of desolate population that's in Martinsville. There's a lot of people in Martinsville that are underemployed or unemployed and spend a lot of time watching local cable access television. And they have a television show called What Does the Bible Say that comes on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Sundays at 7 o'clock. And what they do is they are called to correct the sins of people who call themselves Christians but are not. So they have invaded almost every single church in the area. They actually ran out of churches to harass in Martinsville, and then they even go to Tennessee and to Danville, Virginia, and all of these places. And then so recently, a very well-beloved Presbyterian pastor died in Danville, so they spent an hour explaining to everyone why he was going to hell. And I was warned about these people almost immediately after I arrived, that they were problematic, and they come in, and then they're manipulative. We have a very good relationship with First Baptist Church, and when I went over to go introduce myself, they almost immediately started talking about the Robertsons and how they came in and they came to their Bible study, and they seemed so knowledgeable, and they really kind of wooed the members of that Bible study. And then the pastors kind of knew what was going on, and then so when they started to ask them to not come back, the pastor was like, no, or the parishioners like, no, we want them to teach us about Scripture. And then so they made sure, and so this is their plan. They figure out what they're going to make the conversation be about. They're manipulative. And then they do a bunch of homework on it beforehand, and then have a whole bunch of obscure stuff. So they might have some random passage in Leviticus memorized, and when they ask the pastor, well, what do you think about Leviticus 25, whatever? The pastor will be like, I have to look it up. And they're like, well, I know what it is. And then they seem really smart. The pastor looks dumb. And that's what they do. And then they secretly film it. And when they get kicked out, they do television shows about that church for about 3 months. That's their rhythm. And so, and another character, so there's a man who grew up in Martinsville, and Martinsville was very racist. If you've never heard of the Martinsville 7, it was a major lynching. I commend you to do so. It's very disturbing. And, I need to get moving. Oh my gosh. So anyways, this guy's incredible. And he was a member of the Nation of Islam and then actually reformed, and he's still a very devout Muslim, and his mission is to make better ties between Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And he asked us if we could host an interfaith dialogue. And then I just got done with a funeral. I was emotionally exhausted. And I went up there and I did my talk. And there's a whole bunch of strangers in the church, including children. And I see the Robertsons with video cameras. And I knew that I wasn't going to play their game. And so I got up front, I said, everyone wave to the camera because you're on television. I said, now get out. And I didn't even let them talk. And then they started to say, we didn't do anything wrong. And then I said, did I stutter? Get out. And I called the police on them. They would not leave. And I lost my religion on them. I did not touch them. I did not cuss. We have a lot of lawyers in our church, and they said that you are perfectly fine. We filed trespassing papers, and I live right next to the church, and their television show aired the next day, and the church's Facebook page and my Facebook page blew up with trolls, and initially with one individual who is especially evil. I turned his things into little advertisements, so I would have little arrows pointing up at his evil little comment, just vile. I said, if you don't want to put up with this crap in church, our services are 8 and 10:30. And I tried to put on a brave face, but they were relentless. And he got creepy. We actually got scared. So we had to block him, ban all the members, delete the comments. And for the next 4 months, the Robertsons became my obsession. I do not regret kicking them out. I do not regret being mean to them. They are forces of evil in the world. And then they continue to do evil things. They goaded a mentally ill member of my parish to commit suicide on live television. They try to get him to call in and defend his church. This person doesn't know better. And it was sad. And constantly, on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 9 o'clock, I would log into YouTube because they would live stream it, and I would see if I was a target again. And they put me on television 24 times. And I would watch, and I would just curl into this dark little ball, and I would feel vulnerable, and I would feel afraid. And seeing how my wife reacted to this, how scared she was, it filled me with such regret. And then on the surface, we were strong. Attendance surged. All of the agnostics in Martinsville came to our aid and even went into church on Sunday. And then the next day after that first episode aired, the phone was ringing off of the hook from Baptists, Pentecostals, Methodists, Presbyterians, everyone to lend their support and say, they did that to me too. It was incredible. But when I was by myself, first thing in the morning when I would wake up, is I would pull up their Facebook page, see what dirt they've dug up on me again, if they're going after another parishioner. And it's, like I said, it led me to a dark place. And that constant need to confront evil in the world, though I think it can be often done for the right reasons, it was ruining me. It was turning me into a nervous wreck. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't being a good husband. I wasn't being a good pastor. And I gave it up for Lent. All of that is an illusion of control. I am constantly in that mindset of needing to fight those forces in the world. But there's only so much I can do. I did my part with that. And then to constantly watch the videos was maintaining the illusion of control, that I could fight them, that I could somehow rid them of the world or transform them or something. But the reality is they are in such a dark place themselves, they can never listen to love. They can never listen to reason. They can never listen to compassion. And then so it's been, how many days now? 5 days without watching them. And it's been interesting on how difficult it is to give up that connection to the people who try to actively ruin my life. And it's also liberating. It's also a means of realizing that I don't need to carry all of that burden. I am not perfectly strong. I'm not perfectly intelligent. I am a finite, broken being that is beloved by God. And I can lift up my soul to God, and I can lend that over to Him. And then we're going to start putting my sermons back on our Facebook page, and if they use it, they'll use it, and I won't watch their show. And if people come up to me in Walmart, like they have been, and tell me I'm going to hell and I need to listen to the Robertsons, well, then they can go to hell. So right now, where I stand with Lent, I'm going to try to let it go. And maybe it's a sacrifice. I hope it is. I hope it brings me closer to God. I hope it makes me a little bit more sane and a little bit more capable. But that is where I am. And I'm also learning how to play the piano. Just because I want to be able to eventually learn how to sing the service, and I don't understand music, so I'm learning how to play the piano. And that's just nice and frivolous. All right, well, that's what I have. Does anyone have any questions? I apologize for going over.
Just come home.